Let's see if we can get to the minutes. What I dream about. Stupid match.
That's a nice big one, at least.
We have 4 of us anyways. Wow.
You were so intimidated.
Yeah, I've already got it going there.
Good morning. We'll call this meeting of the Legislative Apportionment Board to order pursuant to the public notice posted for it, which includes information about connecting through Zoom remote platform and it looks like we have a quorum here. We have 3 of us here at the Secretary of State's office on State Street in Montpelier. Jeannie Albert, Rob Roper, and Tom Little, and Mary Houghton. Good morning from Putney.
Good morning.
So that constitutes our quorum, and we can get started. As anyone else joins us, please let us know, and maybe drop something in the chat so we are aware of that. The first item of business on the agenda is the review and approval of the minutes of the board meeting of June 24, Thursday, June 24, which have been posted and edited a bit, but circulated, I think, the final version earlier today. Are there any questions or comments or additions or corrections from anybody on the board? Good to me. Okay. Well, I'll take that as a motion to approve. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Jeannie is seconding the motion. The motion to approve the June 24 meeting minutes as posted has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting those minutes, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and those have been adopted. We next move to public comment under the section 311H of the Vermont Public Meetings Law. And, while we're getting ready for public comment, I will remind everyone listening in that we do have a facility on our website, on the Secretary of State's office website, for sending us written comments, which we have been receiving, and that's another good way to reach out to the apportionment board. And we have something that actually I think came in the old-fashioned way through the postal service, which I'll get to a little bit later. Is there anyone who would like to address the board during public comment? Hello? We'll be right out. Mr. Koch is out. Doors.
And also, Eric, can you hear us? I was wondering if we could see the chat.
I can hear you, yes.
I wondered if you could display the chat.
I think if you use the mouse next to the keyboard there, you'll have full controls.
Oh,
Yeah,
great,
yeah.
thank you.
It looks like we do have two other individuals present. We have John Adams and Benjamin Brickner.
And board member Tom Koch is on his way in. This is a very secure building this morning.
I'm here. I wondered if there's also Wi-Fi available.
There is, if you're looking at the TV monitor on the wall to the left, there is information about the password for the guest Wi-Fi.
Okay, thanks.
It's on a small piece of paper next to the computer modem.
I see it.
Yep.
Okay. Go. Guest 2018.
See, one of the people participating remotely is Ben Brickner. Ben, would you like to address the board during public comment or not?
Hi, good morning. Yes, my name is Benjamin Brickner. I'm a resident in Pomfret, and no, I have no public comment. I'm just here to listen.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Well, why don't we move on? And if others are joining this meeting a little bit later, we can hope to carve out some additional public comment time later. Next on the agenda is update on recent mapping efforts and resources. We've broken out these different agenda items into specific different topics, but it's very possible that some of them will blend in together. Agenda items 4 and 5 in particular. And it may be wise to skip over the number 4, the update on recent mapping efforts, because I think to do that, we're going to necessarily need to talk about the timing of the U.S. Census results. And so let's open up by doing that. We're going to be talking about initially now about the timing of the U.S. Census results, and as has been shared among the board members, and I think has become reasonably public, the U.S. Census final data, which were due to be released on March 31, no later than that, has still not been released, and the Census Bureau's deadline shifted to August 15, which now being a Sunday, the Census Bureau is saying August 16, which being a state holiday in Vermont, the Bennington Battle Day will probably mean effectively August 17. In addition, the folks working with us and on behalf of Legislative Council and I think perhaps John Adams at the Vermont Center for Geographic Information and the people who work directly for the companies that provide the mapping software have been advising that it will take them some time in order to upload those final census figures into their software systems and test them and check them and make sure that they are working. And then at that point, they can be released to users such as apportionment board members, Secretary of State's office staff, and Legislative Council. I've heard different estimates about how long that might take. It might take until the end of August. It might be sooner than the end of August. But there's naturally great caution and concern to be taken to make sure that it works, and we don't start off on some mapping exercises that turn out to be no good. And I've been getting some incoming email messages from Michael Chernick at Legislative Council, who monitors the National Conference of State Legislatures, which has been monitoring all this very, very closely. John Adams, do you have anything to add to that in terms of when the census results are going to be in hand and able to be used through the software systems?
I don't think so. I think we're expecting on Monday, the 16th, that the census will release these data in what they refer to as the legacy format, which is can be challenging to use. So I think the various software companies are figuring out how they will take that and convert it into the various formats that they need to feed their software. I believe we will try to do the same for Vermont and maybe see as quickly as we can update either map or maps and tables, just to maybe identify those areas that are beyond the ideal or the deviation from ideal, and send that out to the board, assuming that is helpful. This won't be a tool you can use to, mock up or come up with various scenarios, but it should identify or flag or the areas that need the most attention, or what the magnitude of the deviation is. So hopefully we can turn that around quickly, but again.
Let me understand something better, John. And will you be, when you're comfortable with moving the data around, will you be creating a new Senate map, a new version of the existing Senate district and existing House districts with the final US Census data embedded in them that will show the deviations?
Correct. So the maps that we've created with the estimates, with the 2018 and 2019 estimates, we will simply replace those estimates with the actual 2020 numbers.
And that we presumably can get that maybe relatively quickly after the 16th, and as opposed to the Maptitude access, which might take a little bit longer.
That's the hope. I think we're all trying to underpromise and overdeliver, but with some of the uncertainty around what we'll be getting, we want to make sure we're managing expectations, but we'll try to turn that around as quickly as possible.
Any questions for John? As usual, John, thanks for your diligence and your availability.
Certainly, and let me know if there's anything, when that comes out, if there's any specific questions or any things you would like highlighted, we can try to.
As you know, you've gained 7 new best friends on the Apportionment board. We're very grateful for your work. This is
Happy to help.
something that we really didn't have 10 years ago. The resources from VCGI. In terms of the mapping, I have been working with Mia Crow from the Secretary Secretary of State's office, trying to get some traction on redistricting, mapping changes, what I would call exploratory changes to take a piece of the existing House or Senate map and try to identify the districts that where population deviations indicate that changes need to be made and start moving lines. We did some work briefly in a system called District Builder, which is one of the alternatives to Maptitude. That is a free open source software, and arguably at least has some better ease of access. It doesn't provide the full panoply of data and variations.
Weed whacker. Propped up with me.
And one of the things that's become apparent in that initial work with the District Builder is these softwares, I think, tend to be built to support changes in U.S. House districts more than they are the maybe idiosyncratic redistricting efforts that we have here in Vermont. And so so census block by census block seem more easily than town by town. Of course, town are made up of census blocks, but it's one of the things we may anticipate in doing our work is that they, at least with District Builder, it can be used with a very, very fine level of detail. Census blocks can have 15 people and 15 residents in them, or much greater. And, that bumps us up into our efforts to try to avoid subdividing towns. Jeannie, do you want to mention something about this?
Sure,
You want to-
I have it on the
You have it,
computer,
okay.
but you can do that if you want.
Jeannie, Albert, and I were brainstorming earlier in the week, or maybe late last week, about how to get once we get the software up and running, what should our work plan be? What should our deadlines be? Because we know that under the existing law, until it was revised by the legislature this past spring, all of our work was under the law required to be done by the middle or the end of August. This has now been pushed off, and it occurred to Jeannie and myself, it's not a novel idea, that having a more specific work plan might be useful and might keep us on a better track. So Jeannie, I'll turn it over to you because you did the initial draft of that.
Okay, sure. What I did really was meant to provide an anchor for the deadlines that are required in statute in either the original or the revised H 338, which was the legislation that extended the deadlines for the board to do its work. So I think, Tom, you sent this around this morning or yesterday, and so I'm just looking at what you sent, and which is what I had put together. So this is meant to be an anchor, not so much of a like fine-tuned, we're going to do this work by any particular day, but we can add that. I figured at least if we know what some of the deadlines are. It'll give us a place to start. And so the first two that I included are just what we were talking about earlier, that, you know, when we can expect to get some information from the Census Bureau. And we were just talking about how maybe by the end of the month, some of that could be used for certain types of analysis, even if it isn't for complete mapping work. And that's what John was talking about as well. That, you know, I'm hoping the Census Bureau says it will have the final product by the end of September. Hopefully that will be earlier than that, but of course that's something we'll just have to monitor to make sure, you know, we'll know, hopefully, you know, sometime soon when we're gonna get that.
That date might, did you get to the September date by something relatively recent?
Yeah.
Because I thought that originally that was an August, end of August date from the census.
The Census Bureau, I'll go there now, it is, that's what it said at the Census Bureau when I looked at, you know, whenever I put this together, which is within the last week, they have the August date, mid-August, and then they still have the by September 30th. So we'll just have to see how that goes in terms of actually getting the data. On the other end, I work backwards from the legislation that the Vermont, you know, that was passed in Vermont, extending the deadline, which the language there is that we're supposed to produce our district plans for the House and Senate 90 days after we get the data. It's the way the language reads. So I worked from September 1st. We could shift that if that turns out to be not the best date to use as the day we get our day we get the data. But so that gets us to the end of November, basically, as the deadline for us to submit our final plans. And then I work backwards from there, looking a little bit at what the what some of the, you know, time frame is in the original legislation. So in the original legislation, there's 2 weeks between, you know, for us to do kind of some final work after hearing from towns. So that's kind of how I back my way up from the end of November, but just moving in a forward direction. The dates that you get are by October 25th, we have to make our tentative plan, house plan available to towns who might be divided or regrouped in some way into districts. And that date comes from the fact that this new H 338 says that towns should have at least 21 days to respond. And that gets them to November 15th and then gives us another 2 weeks to respond to their responses. So those are the dates I stuck in here. So again, just when we are expecting deadlines for when we expect to get the data from the Census Bureau, and then several other dates that correspond to when we would have to have a tentative plan available for towns to look at. But of course, between September 30th and October 25th, which isn't really that, or whenever, sorry, I should say September 1st, hopefully, if we got it even earlier, we could, you know, think about other benchmarks for when we might want to have certain drafts ready. I didn't even pretend to try to do that. But I just wanted to get us started with some of the dates we know for sure are, we have to keep in mind.
Thanks for that. So that would mean we could start from this and try to establish some interim deadlines for going from the end of August to October 25.
Right.
Which is a 6 or 7 week period during which we could say, well, week 2, we need to have reached this point, whatever that might be, in week 3, et cetera.
It is-
So at what point do we expect this to be embedded into the
Aptitude.
Maptitude or other programs?
By the end of August, and maybe a little sooner. I think we don't, the person at Legislative Council, Sean Allen, they're gonna do their darndest to get it as soon as they can, but they just don't know until they see the data and how easy or not easy it is going to be to work with it.
So they'll be doing it.
And I also don't understand fully how much they're going to be doing and how much is happening at, what's the name of the company that owns Maptitude? It's the Maptitude company.
Yeah.
I don't know that Maptitude is allowing individual users to load the new census data in, or whether it makes more sense to try to load it in at the home office, so to speak.
One would think that would be the case. They probably don't want.
But I think
to-
as John noted, maybe everyone is being cautious about overpromising about when we can have it, so we don't get off on the wrong foot or get further frustrated by delays. And I can understand that. Mary, any comments on that idea about developing some interim and short-term deadlines and benchmarks?
No, I think Jeannie did a great job developing this list of deadlines. It's very grounding, and it will be very helpful to me as a complete newcomer at this to have interim deadlines as well.
I mean, I did it more for myself too, that's kind of why I did it. It helps me to just see what's coming, to have those anchors.
Yeah.
I'm glad it was helpful.
And I will share it with the lawyers at Legislative Council just to see if they have any, if they think we missed something or they have a different view of. As Jeannie said, the revised statutory deadlines start not from a specific date, but from when we receive the final census data. Of course, there's some nuance to that. There's receiving it, and then there's receiving it in a way that we can use it.
Right.
And then the data that are going to come in September, that package is not, John Adams, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my understanding is that will have additional bells and whistles on it or with it, but it won't be things that we need in order to do our main work. Is that right, John?
I think that's true. I think that that September date will go unnoticed, because by then I think various parties will have reformatted and made the data available and usable in any format that you would need. And my expectation is that there will be limited utility in that September release, which will include, various press releases and charts and graphs and other things that the census would want to roll out. But for your purposes, my expectation is that these data should all be the same as you would already have, and others will have taken it and put it into the tools that you need to use.
Yeah, I just found what I hope is the most recent posting from the census, July 28th. They just say the first release by August 16th is timelier in its delivery, and the second release by September 30 is easier to use. And it's exactly the same, but in different formats. But it sounds like what John was saying is that, you know, maybe that, you know, we have the benefit of having a lot of assistance to get that earlier release into an easier to use format. And there may be other folks in other states who are gonna really have to wait to that September 30th, but perhaps it sounds like we'll have sooner access.
Right.
I believe other states are struggling with this very same question and have similar
Yeah.
legislation that was passed that is relative to the date of release, and they're trying to figure out what that date is.
Yeah. So there is a certain amount, there's still a little uncertainty, but it does look like we're gonna, you know, at least be able to use it in some way fairly soon.
So has anyone been, understanding that we have not really had access to what we need access to, has anyone on the board have anything to share about at least some conceptual or other approaches you may have had or may be thinking about concerning redistricting strategies or tactics? Rob, have you been
No, I haven't been playing,
pondering this or?
well, apart from just going through the emails that we've been getting through the Secretary of State's office, trying to take in some of the comments that people have made. We've had about probably 10 or so. But I haven't been playing with the map. But that does get a question, is the Maptitude training sessions that we did a while back, I think are online someplace recorded that we can review.
Yes.
If somebody who has those links could share them, because I think now's the time to start boning up and start playing around just for the sake of getting used to the software. We can start doing
It's a good idea.
Aaron, why don't you note that in the minutes? And I know that Mia Crow can send that to us, and I also know that that if we wanted additional hands-on training, that legislative council would be the place to try to set that up, and their request would be that we try to do it as in a small group as opposed to individually. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know, and I'm probably interested in doing that. Go ahead, Mary.
A couple of questions. Is there somebody in the state to ask sort of, you know, short technical questions? I mean, I have a laptop and then I have a larger screen, and I want to know how to expand the map on the larger screen, because it always comes up the size of the laptop. So it's like a tech question that I don't know where to go with.
Okay. Yeah, I think you could try shooting an email to Mia Crow.
Start with Mia.
And she can either help you or help you find assistance, and there may be a helpline at Maptitude.
Okay, thank you.
Rob reminded me of something I was thinking about regarding the contact form submissions. And it'd be great if they were all collected somewhere. And I say that sort of, not volunteering necessarily to do it. I mean, they're not that many, so maybe it's not that big of a deal.
I'd be happy to do that. In fact, that was one of my tasks to do before this meeting for everyone. I was going to surprise everybody, but the weather's been
Well,
too
if you're
good.
volunteering, it's gonna let you.
The weather's been too good,
Yeah.
so I didn't do it, but I'm happy to do that.
Not that, I mean.
I've flagged them all and I've organized them all. I just haven't cut and pasted them into a single document and done any sort of analysis.
That's great, that's great.
But I'm happy to do that.
Okay, perfect.
Tom, it's Michael Chernick. I tried to get into the building, the back and the front, and then gave up and just came back to my office. So,
No.
Sorry, well, at least two of us had the same problem, and I guess we banged on the door louder than you did.
I guess so.
Good to see you. In terms of the mapping exercises, as Rob indicated, we've been getting a series of incoming messages from residents of the town of Huntington that I mean, they're public record that we can make, we will make them available to those who want to see them. The common theme there is that Huntington is in a house district that, in terms of population, is dominated by the town of Waterbury in Washington County, a different county. And the town of Huntington is in a Senate district in a different county. And at least with one exception, the submitters from Huntington are very frustrated with that and feel that it's inappropriate and unfair, and that they're not well, it impairs their ability to be well represented. There was one commentator, however, who felt exactly the opposite, who said that's nonsense and we have good representation, and maybe it's better than it used to be. So I have, in some cases, responded by thanking them for contacting us. I think it's good to be try to be able to do that so people know that they were heard. I've also, in a very short way, described the challenges that we have. Not that this is certainly not Huntington's fault, but the challenges we have and have had in the past with drawing a map where the population deviations work as required by the Constitution. That also caused me to look at the Senate, existing Senate map, and to reflect on the decision that the legislature made 9 years ago, it'll be 10 next year, to put Huntington into the Addison Senate District. And at prior board meetings, we've discussed the background for how that happened. Jeannie and I were on the phone and going through it again. And if you simply took Huntington out of the Addison Senate District, their estimated deviation right now with Huntington in is about a -6 or 7 estimated. If you took Huntington out, that would probably go to a 8 or 9, maybe a little higher, which isn't necessarily problematic, but it's certainly approaching problematic. So if you took Huntington out, you'd have to try to look to another way to bring more people into the Addison Senate District. On the south side, you've got
Wasn't Brandon in there at one
you
time?
have 4 Rutland County towns. Brandon being the larger one, which used to be which is the Rutland County town, which used to be in the Addison Senate District until 10 years ago, which created the deficit that caused the legislature to move Huntington there. So taking another town from Rutland County, which continues to have population, negative population deviation issues would not be optimal going to the east side into Orange County. Those are very small towns, Pittsfield, Rochester, Granville, or into Washington County, Warren, Facein, on the other side of the mountain. And that brings you back to the north side of Addison County, which is Chittenden County, which is Charlotte, Heinsberg, and Huntington.
Did you say that Rochester, Granville, and
Pittsfield.
Pittsfield are in Orange County?
No,
No.
Rochester's in
Rochester
Windsor.
Rochester is in Windsor.
I'm sorry, that's not corrected.
Yeah,
Uh,
but they're small also, and they're over the mountain. It's basically Addison as a county, and I think what you're saying is that no matter what, it's, if you really removed everything that wasn't Addison County, it would be approaching too small. It'd be right near the
Now,
edge. and so-
another way of possibly addressing Addison County situation, but I think this is very tricky, would be to say, well, what would it look like if you changed Addison into 2 single-member districts?
Read my mind.
And is there a way of doing that so that while the county as a whole is in a negative deviation, significant negative deviation situation, if you subdivided it, would that make it better or not any worse? And I don't know. I haven't tried to crack that nut.
What's the population of Middlebury by itself?
I don't have that, but it's, that is the,
Yeah,
that and for Jens, Bristol,
8780 probably,
80,
you know, 9,000, maybe 9,000.
okay.
But that includes the students.
Pardon?
It includes the students, which it has to include. Whatever you make of it.
so that's an exercise that we or someone can go through to see if subdividing it, I know works. I know that my efforts to subdivide the Chittenden Senate District over the last 10 years, sometimes the configurations of smaller districts actually capture a bigger bulge in population, so the deviation can be worse.
But when you talked about taking Huntington out of the district, out of the Addison district, that does not cross the line. It approaches it, but it doesn't cross it.
I don't, but we'll see when we get,
We'll
we'll
where
see.
you put Huntington and what effect that have on where it goes.
If you put it into a Chittenden Senate district, what Huntington has asked for, at least the residents who've reached out have asked for, is to be in the same Senate district with the other towns in the Unified Union School District, which are Richmond, Bolton, Underhill, and Jericho, but are not enough. That's not populous enough for a single-member Senate district. The Apportionment Board's proposal from 10 years ago was to put Charlotte into the Addison district, and which did better to ease the deviation problems, because Charlotte has more people in it than Huntington by maybe double the amount. Likewise, Heinsberg, those are both bigger towns, quite a bit than Huntington, and would make the numbers look better. But the testimony that was taken here and at the legislature was none of those 3 towns wanted to be in the Addison Senate District. So and those are the people I think we've heard from, and that, you know, when you hear from residents, you start going back and looking at the map and say, well, how could we, that none of them has, to my knowledge, has proposed a specific map solution to their concern, except to say, we don't want to be there, we want to be here. But you know, that's why we're here. Figure that out.
Okay, but I want to get back. You're going to try to arrange something for additional training.
I will reach out and do that. We will also get the access to the, yes, I will, access to the recording of the sessions that were run earlier in the year. One of the reasons I specifically asked John about when we will see the final census numbers dropped into the existing map is to see, that will enable us, we've done an estimated count of the number of House districts that we think are in trouble in terms of deviation. This will allow us to, for the final count, I think that's a good segue to my idea that I think I laid out in the memo from July 31. That in addition to increasing the frequency of our meetings, I think that we will not be successful or not be timely or both if we rely on all of the mapping work to be done by us as a committee of the whole. And it certainly was true 10 years ago, and I think that I'm strongly encouraging us to do that work into either individually or perhaps in a buddy system where if you think it would be useful, buddy up with someone and work on it so that you harness two imaginations. And some of this really involves imagination and vision as much as anything else. And just, this is tedious and challenging work, but just start working on it when we get the magnitude stuff, so that by the middle of September, we have some different maps to look at. Maybe not complete maps, but at least some significantly completed proposals. Because that's really where the rubber meets the road, to use a tired metaphor. I don't intend to, as the chair, designate or make assignments in that regard, and I don't think we want to. I don't think the board wants to divide up into subcommittees, because if we do that in a formal or official way, all of those, any such subcommittees would be subject to the public records law, the open meeting law. Every time you met, you'd have to schedule a public meeting and have public comment and post agendas and stuff. And this really needs to be more of an ad hoc process that you're doing on your own time. And so I think that's important. The only other thing I would suggest is if you can let the rest of us sort of know what your strategy is, so we're not doing too much duplication. And it would be great if some of these efforts, in that talking in the House now, said, well, we're going to start in Powell and work our way up to state, and someone else says, no, I'm going to start in Orleans County and work our way down, because you get significantly different looking maps depending upon where you start. Somebody could also say, well, I'm going to start, what's the geographic center of the state? They say Randolph. Start in the middle of the state and somehow work one's way out. The advantage of that, the other way of doing it would be to say, let's start in a place in the state that looks okay in terms of deviations, and then work out from there until you hit a district that really needs some changes. Yeah. I just took a look at the existing house map, and I have a question on this for Michael, if Michael Chernick is still on, but I came up with 7 towns that are split currently in the house map. In other words, these are not towns that are so large that they're subdivided internally, but these are towns where part of the town, usually the lion's share of the town, is in one house district, and a small part of the town is in another house district. Timing is perfect.
Sorry.
Thanks, Eric.
I'm talking about the number of towns that are currently split between 2 different houses.
Right, and we went over the list.
And I came up with Milton,
Right,
because of the portion of West Milton is in the 2-member,
and I told you.
Grand
the story
Hour is
about
great.
that.
And there's some interesting stories about how these things happen.
Every one of them has a story, almost every one has a story.
Heinsberg, a very, very small portion of Heinsberg
It's about 150
is
votes.
in,
Charlotte.
is in the, no, very small part of Heinsberg is in the Charlotte single-member district. Troy is divided, and they actually, the folks up in Troy
Troy agreed to.
agreed to that. And that was to help,
What?
um,
No, it's
That's fine.
a matter of numbers.
Sunderland, the metropolis of Sunderland, is split. In portion of that is in the Sandgate, Manchester, Arlington 2-member district.
And a piece of it's in the Shaftesbury district.
Yeah. Really, it's split twice?
Maybe not.
Well, no, the rest of Sunderland is in the Shaftesbury
Shaftesbury district, that was what happened to keep Shaftesbury.
Hartford, the town of Hartford is split to a Hartford only district. It's 2 members, and then the rest of Hartford, the westernly portion is in with Pomfret and Barnard.
Right, and as I explained to you, no matter what you do with Hartford, whether it's all singles or a 2-member district as it currently is for the majority of the town, it's just, has always been too big to fit within the confines of just not being split somewhere. So the
And
western piece has been split historically.
a portion, the southwest corner of Whitingham is in the Wyndham Bennington single-member district that is composed of Stamford, Reedsboro, Searsburg, Somerset, Dover, and Wardsboro.
I believe that one, Tom, was purely a matter of numbers. There was no
And then,
special story.
Michael, you had suggested that a slice of St. Albans City is
So what
in,
I'm saying, yeah, a slice of the city is with the town in order that there can be a district that's predominantly St. Albans City and a district that's predominantly St. Albans Town. Because it's saying, it doesn't work for the city to be 2, it's way too small, and yet it's too big to be a 1. And so that's what happens. But if you put a piece of the city and the town together, it works as a second district. Again, it's a matter of numbers.
It might be helpful to get some testimony from some of the clerks in these districts about what the challenges are for polling places and ballots? Because that seems to me to be the biggest challenge with splitting a district is, where do you go to vote as a citizen? Maybe I'm wrong in that, but because of my.
No, I can tell you from the, there's at least confusion. And we can do that. I mean, we're going to be reaching out, and maybe we may be able to fold that into the outreach we do with the preliminary map when we send it out to the boards of civil authority for that. But we could also do it separately, and I think that's part of the reason why the law says we should try to avoid subdividing towns and moving them into different house districts. So there are 8 towns like that you had.
And of course, as you said, that excludes internal splits of cities and large towns, the Bennington, the Brattleboro, the Burlington, the South Burlington, Rutland, I think that's all. Of course, Barry's all together now, is when Barry City is together and Barry Town, they reach distinct. There's no longer that little bit of Barry City or Barry Town that there was years ago.
Barry City and going into Berlin.
That's right. When it was still represented Towns District going way back.
Any comment or reaction to my idea about the need for members or maybe groups of 2 members to start brainstorming when we get the access to the software? Does that make sense? Do you think that's as urgent as I do?
It does. It does make sense to me.
I think it does.
The only comment I'd have is that we know the way the board was constructed on a political basis, and I suspect that the subcommittee would not be composed of Rob and me.
No,
That's what we go up with.
Hi there.
Hello, Mary. Welcome.
Thank you. It might also make sense to play a little musical chairs with who you team up with. Maybe Tom and I can work on a map, and then he goes with Jeremy and I go with Jeannie, and we say, okay, this is what Tom and I came up with. What do you think? And
it may turn out that if this is a buddy system, that having one of the 2 people be better at the technology than the other person would be a good match as well.
I think Jeremy.
Can we all?
Kind of all do.
That's true.
Jeremy, we're talking now about the idea that I floated in my July 31 memo about in my view, the urgency of having individual members or perhaps 2-person teams in an ad hoc sort of way when the software is uploaded and available to start cranking out some maps, and that we can't do this as a committee of the whole, sitting around a conference room table and moving lines. We can do some of that, and we will do some of that when we get some of these maps done, because sooner or later we will be saying, well, the one that Tom and Jeannie worked on looks like it's building some momentum and some consensus. So let's see if we can perfect that one. We'll get to that at some point, but we can't do that without a lot of trial and error. Jerry, I can follow up with you on some of the other things we've been kicking around and see some of this in the minutes. But my idea, my request also would be that where possible, these individual efforts maybe pick different parts of the map as starting points, so we get the benefit of that diversity of approach, both in the Senate and in the House. and which could include starting where there's a real problem to fix, or starting where the map looks like the districts looks like they're largely okay, and see where that takes us. I'm sorry, Michael, we did hear a brief update from John Adams. I also earlier on, and we had a discussion about this, briefed everyone on where we think we are in terms of receiving the
Right.
US Census data, and also in terms of when that will be uploaded into the various software systems that are under use, including Maptitude, and when those will actually be accessible to us with all that stuff uploaded and in a functioning format.
And it's our understanding at Ledge Council, you probably already said that, 2 points. Number one, that the US Census data will be released in its rough form on Monday, August 16th. The 15th is Sunday. And we've had confirmation a couple of times now from the census on the 16th. And secondly, Maptitude is telling all of us at Ledge Council that it will be accessible on the 21st in the more usable form. So that's what we're being told.
August 21st.
August 21st, yes. And we hope that's right.
Just a thought that just popped into my head on splitting of towns. I wonder is as the state moves to more vote by mail, if that will decrease any confusion that people have about a split town, because they'll just get a ballot in the mail, send it back in, so they don't figure out where they're going to go.
It's just the town clerk then that has to, disaggregate those.
I mean, as a general principle, there's just more opportunities for people. There are going to be people who want to vote in person.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it does make it easier.
I didn't say eliminate, I said decrease.
Absolutely.
No, and I think we all know this, but it's worth saying it here that as you've seen from the some of the comments coming in from places like Huntington, is that there is a keen interest in keeping within towns, of keeping the towns together and not subdivided, at least by a lot of people. And some of that goes back to the first reapportionment and the feelings about the plight of small towns and wanting to continue to feel that they have a voice and a say. And if it's particularly if a town is split between two-member districts, that's sort of a special version of that. Jeremy, do you have anything to report on from your ponderings about this in terms of a map idea or anything? Okay.
No, not really. I mean, I'm still just sort of twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the data to roll in. And I'm going to try to, I may be able to get the data into Maptitude before Ledge Council does. I'm going to try to do that on my own. I also coincides with the beginning of my semester, so it's, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to spend.
Are you teaching a class in mapping and reapportionment?
No, I probably should. It would have lined up real well.
We'll do it. Work on that for the next time.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mike. Anything else from Ledge Council, Michael?
No, other than just those 2 dates, the 16th and 21st. And Amron and I are having a discussion as to what your actual report date would be, 3 months, whether it was the 16th or the 21st. And I was saying to Amron, well, there really isn't a reapportionment police that's going to enforce it 5 days, one or the other. We leave that to your difference.
We have,
90 days.
Jeannie drafted a workflow, work plan type of a document that I think runs it from a less optimistic actual date for getting things up and running of September 30th, August 30, the end of August, we get it. But we'll revise this as we go along.
We're hoping the 21st, as I said, that is what Caliper, the vendor, has been telling us for the last week. So we have no more to go on to what the vendor tells us, so we just hope it's right.
Okay. In my memo, I also floated the idea of holding some public informational meetings or hearings, if you would, statewide. This is in addition to the outreach, any other outreach we will be doing, in addition to reaching out to the boards of civil authority, the town and municipal clerks, and the League of Cities and Towns. It just appealed to me to think about the prospect of having a meeting in every single county to further bring this out to the public awareness, and to also demonstrate that the Apportionment Board cares enough about every corner of the state to hold a hearing in every corner of the state. Now, that's 14 hearings of one sort or another. I think some of us have probably been involved in going around the state doing hearings of one sort or another. That they could be a combination of in-person and remote. But it says something in particular about having a member of the board actually show up in a place in Vermont. So that's something I'm interested in trying to figure out a way to do. And if we divided these up among the 7 members of the Apportionment Board, it might well be doable. So I'm interested in hearing any feedback from that. Mary, how do you feel coming from the southern tier about that idea? Could you unmute?
Sorry.
I think it's a great idea. Go back to where I can see everybody. Certainly, I think the southern tier of the state, often folks down here feel a little bit neglected, so I think it would be very good. Certainly Windham County is easy for me. Bennington is less so, just because it's the other side. Windsor would be easier, but yeah, I think it's a fine thought.
I think it's a good idea, and I'm happy to participate and, do a couple of them. I think what would make it easier for everybody is we agree on having a single PowerPoint presentation that could be put together that each of us could bring to such a meeting. So for a couple of reasons. One, to make sure that we're all communicating the same thing and that we're all communicating everything that needs to be communicated. So we need to put that together as a committee. I would feel uncomfortable just kind of showing up and winging it,
Oh, no doubt. And we could set these up. And I haven't really run this carefully by Chris Winters in the Secretary of State's office, but have some remote capacity as well, so that other members of the apportionment board could also be participating, but not physically present. And the same thing is true, I know, Mary, for the folks in Essex County, Orleans and Caledonia. And particularly in some of these areas are also areas where the negative population deviations are the most significant, and where there's going to be need to be more district line changes than in areas of state. Although the same thing is true about the areas where the population is bulging.
If we prepare a PowerPoint presentation, I would make it very brief and hit the critical points. Because the people who show up at these hearings are going to have a pretty good understanding of what the process is and what their interests are, what they want to say. They really don't need a full course in what we're doing.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree with that.
And maybe also include somehow the existing Senate and House district maps with the population changes in them, so that people can say, oh yeah, now I get it.
By the way, Tom, if I may just interject as an FYI, on the legislature, I think you all were aware that on the legislature site, and I can always send you the link again easily, are the detailed information from the final 2012 product, maps, statistics, district by district maps. It's all very detailed, there, saved, and easily accessible for you to use.
Well, I'll continue to try to figure out a way to do that. These would be just to accommodate travel. I mean, I've done, when I was on the governor's advisory commission on marijuana policy, I did one in Bennington that started at 7 p.m. and I came down. There were just two of us doing those. We didn't do 14, but we did Bennington and separately in Brattleboro, and I did Bennington at 7 o'clock at night, got done at 9:30, and then drove down and drove back, and it's a long day.
Especially when you get there and people show up.
That didn't happen in Bennington with the marijuana.
Yeah, well, marijuana.
And starting them a little earlier in the evening, which may not be as convenient for everybody, but at least if somebody has to do a lot of driving, that makes it a little more doable. Tom, a funny story about that Bennington marijuana commission hearing is it was in November, late November. It was rainy, it was dark, and I got to it was being held at the Veterans Home, which is a very large piece of property, a lot of buildings, and if you're not familiar with it, get there at night, you really feel a little lost. But as I started driving in, there was this enormous crowd outside. I said that Dick Sears, look at what he's done. He's got everybody all riled up about this. Well, it turned out that they were showing up for decorating a Christmas tree and singing Christmas carols. And then at the hearing, there were about 30 people at the hearing. So that was, I didn't have a chance to stop and help with the Christmas celebration. And was it you, Jeannie, or someone else who suggested to me, hearkening back to the old Vermont interactive television system, where you could do this all on one night? So you'd have, you could have, I don't even know if that system still exists.
It's gone.
It's gone, but
It's gone.
and I don't know how many of those locations were spread around the state.
I think there were about 10 or 12 in the
But you could have in that case, if somebody, one person from the board go to each one, and then it's all simultaneous across the statewide, and you get that. I don't think that probably would be possible using Zoom in some manner.
With Zoom, could we still use the network of public access television to maybe not do it all at once, but at least film it in one place and then distribute it through the public access television network? I know a lot of people do that with some of the shows that they create. You know, they create it in St. Albans and then they distribute it. If you have a sponsor, I think is the way it works, but the state could easily get a sponsor in all of the different districts. It's like channel 17 in Burlington, channel 15 in St. Albans, and I don't know what the other ones are, Orca.
Orca here in.
Yeah.
It'd probably be just a matter of just giving them a call and they'd record it as a public service.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's doable, but in terms of like synchronous people being able to show up and ask questions or.
That's true. You wouldn't have the call in, a statewide call in effect, but you know, we could do a panel discussion over at Orca and have them film it and then distribute that throughout the network.
Oh, yeah.
People could see it. And at the end, you could have, if you have comments, you know, email Secretary of State something like that.
Orca also, I know Orca, and I believe the others do now, if I may, they have a streaming capacity as opposed to a standard cable television capacity. So when they put it on the stream, anyone across the state can see it.
I was interviewed by someone at Channel 17 in Burlington a couple of weeks ago, and they're saying that they're gonna push that out too. And it was just the usual, you know, my talking points that when I interviewed. And it was relatively, say it was on a simplistic level, but it covered the basics and didn't take too deep a dive. Well, I'm still animated by the idea of having somebody show up in every county, but we'll see if we can figure out a way to pull it off. My own schedule personally isn't going to allow me to do too many of those late at night. That's what I have to do.
But we have to, if we're going to do it, we need to get the ball rolling on the logistics of doing it, because once we get the data, I think, you know, the time for car travel up into the team is going to be limited.
Yeah, there's 7 of us on the 4th, there's 14 counties. You show up at 2.
We're not very well dispersed geographically, but we could work.
I mean, I know some folks in Bennington too, so you know, like if it was easier, you know, I could go down there and stay somewhere probably by myself over, or you know.
Well, we can cover some of those the expenses to some extent.
Well, in any case, I'm just saying that there are some that would otherwise I would be more of a challenge, but you know, there are other opportunities to make it work. Don't forget some of those big maps printed out.
Some of
I
these.
keep looking at them. I mean, I could, there are places I could go locally, but then I thought maybe maybe they have an apparatus in this building.
Oh, I suspect when we break, we'll go find
Okay.
out. And let's say the council.
We can go to that size. What we probably will not do, and don't hold me to this, but what I suspect is that we will not lease the supersized printers that we used to do years ago, because we were using the computer so much more. And the members we have in fact, we will now in all the House committee rooms have these very large video screens with roughly equivalent to that. And the members, even in 2012, let alone 2022, were using the large video screen as opposed to giant sized paper the way we did in 2002. So we won't have the very big size, but we certainly have the ability to print at that size.
It's not essential. I have smaller versions of that, but it is
It's nice.
Yeah, it would
be
nice.
nice.
Thank you.
I think I've covered everything that we had on the agenda. At least we can go into more detail on anything if you'd like.
Yep. Oh, the survey that Jeannie.
Go ahead.
That Jeannie and I were
Yeah.
working on in the public comments. I sent the link around about a week ago. Did everybody get a chance to look at it? I don't have Wi-Fi here. Jeannie, maybe you can just click on the link. And the idea was we were trying to come at some of the questions. Basically, everybody wants to have all single member, not everybody, but by and large, people want single member districts that tightly conform to town boundary lines and don't split towns, which, doesn't work. So we tried to come at the questions in some ways to try and gauge what the priorities were in getting that. Some of the questions are pretty straightforward that we put forward in the op-ed. One of them that we tried to do that I thought was kind of interesting is how would you solve a problem? A, B, and we've got town A, B, and C. You could either have a 2-member district that doesn't split the town, or you could have 2 single-member districts that does split one town. How would you do that? Which it would force people to create a priority in their head. So what we had like 10 or 12 questions.
Yeah,
Can you go through them, Gene?
yeah, you want me to just
Yeah, does
read
it,
them?
well, I guess first, if everybody's read them on the committee, actually, yes, for posterity and the folks
Okay. Yeah.
listening, it'd probably be good just to read the questions.
So what we've got at the moment are, so the first question is regarding House representation in state government. Do you prefer single-member House districts, 1 representative representing 4,300 people, or 2-member House districts, 2 representatives in a single district representing 8,600? And obviously those are round numbers. But anyway, I prefer single, I prefer 2-member, I have no preference. Straightforward. Which of the following statements best reflects your thoughts about single representative versus 2 representative House districts? I think they all should be single, and then or all should be 2-member, and then I prefer 1, but don't mind the other. And then a place for people to just explain why they prefer single or 2-member if they want. There's like a free response box. There's a scaled one. How important is it to you that House district lines conform to town and city borders? So they can move the slider from 0 to 100.
So if I could just make a comment, in terms of survey design, especially for folks on mobile platforms, the slider style of giving feedback is actually not recommended. It'd be better to have like the Likert scale. Yeah, so okay, strongly disagree to strongly agree or something like that. And then similarly, the ranking in number 8 should be also something like that, because I mean, when I've gotten survey data back, people just skip those because they can't muddle around on their phone, and there's a lot of folks who are going to be responding via their phone.
Oh, good point.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of feedback that we wanted to get.
Sometimes, I don't know about SurveyMonkey, but you reminded me that in the brief experience I had using Qualtrics.
Yeah, it does automatically.
They do have like how would this work on a phone? So that you can kind of check that, though I don't know how good it really is, because I didn't do that, but thank you for that. Right, so we have, let's see, sorry, it says in an ideal world, each representative would represent the same, we should say exactly the same number of residents, which would perfectly satisfy the quote 1 person, 1 vote requirement. Deviations from this number by 10% or more either way are considered unconstitutional. Also, in an ideal world, those district lines would neatly conform to existing town lines. However, these two aren't always reconcilable. Rob, you mentioned this one. Given your priorities, which best describes your values? And so, basically where deviations are as close to 0 as possible versus respect for community boundaries. I did want to ask about this. Just, is it really correct to say that deviations by 10% are unconstitutional?
Well, we probably would say constitutionally challengeable might be a better.
Subject to legal challenge.
I mean, I'm not trying to get too picky, but yeah.
No, that was kind of a question of, how in the weeds do you want to go with the question to get the right answer? And But I think, and
Yeah.
for the sake of honesty, I guess.
Well, I
lack of a
think one of
better
the reasons
word.
I like it, even though this
Yeah.
is one of the wordier, you know, the question itself is longer, the text is longer. I think it's sort of this other opportunity to educate people to why these issues really even come up.
Mhm.
You know, it's not just, oh, you know, we got this issue or this issue. It's like there's reasons we have to pay attention to them, and this gives at least a little more information. Then space for further comment. Then there's the A, B, and C problem of how to divide something in a particular way. How would you draw the lines to solve this mapping problem? 3 towns, A, B, and C. A's population 5,000, B's 2,000, and C's 1,600. And this is kind of a way of getting at this idea of where the rubber meets the road, you actually have to make these kinds of decisions of either combining things in a particular way or not.
Mhm.
So one option is to combine all of towns B and C, but part of town A to make your district, or to combine all of them to make 2 member districts. Just kind of another way to look at this idea of what actually
Try to
happens.
crack the brain nut.
Well, it's sort of, yeah, you can say, well, I like single member, I like double member, or whatever your idea about it, but when it really comes down to, this is what it would really mean.
And will mean.
And it will
Will mean in some
Yes.
places.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not avoidable.
And then the ranking order one that had to do with these other issues which we are meant to look at, but which give people an opportunity to say which are the most important to them, which are geographic type of thing, solid waste district, school district, health service district, county, environmental district, supervisory union, town.
Yeah, I'm sure I left some stuff off when we wrote that. But
I don't.
And maybe some aren't, waste district, maybe that's important, maybe it's not. We just kind of threw everything that we could think of on there. Maybe some needs to be added, maybe some needs to be taken away, but.
Yeah, these were, and just remembering when we were talking about this, I recall somebody mentioned these to me in some conversation I had. Some of these I have a feeling also are more important to the representatives. That's another interesting side to this. So I think at least that one maybe, I don't even remember now. Somebody said, that was of concern to them because when their district is divided, it just makes it more complicated for them.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And nobody knows what solid waste district there is.
Well, that's where I think from the representatives get to know that because somebody brings it up to them, but your average person wouldn't.
Are these, can we shuffle these in SurveyMonkey? Is that possible? Like, so
I don't
people
know,
get a different ordering each time?
Yes, that's a bunch of, but well, let's go through it and then we'll talk to Chris about
Yeah,
those, because this is just my survey monkey,
Oh, I see.
which we don't want to send out, so that the Secretary of State's office will have to recreate it
I see.
in their survey monkey with our final edits and
Gotcha.
suggestions.
Cool.
So the remaining are the same, basically the same questions, but on the Senate side,
Mhm.
where there's a few that are kind of the same type of question. And then we asked also for some demographic, I mean, it isn't, we did say name, although I don't think we should talk about that, whether we want it to be. I mean, it's, all right, sorry, I didn't mean to get confused there, but we want to know where people are because that helps us understand,
Yeah, I think where should be required, but name should be optional.
Yeah, and then you can fix whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, the other, so what town they live in. And then we could ask them, this is sort of a little bit of a side quote, we don't need this information, but if we also ask them what district they're in, it'd be interesting to find out how many people know what district they're in. But I think we should ask them, if we want to know what district they're in, which I think we do, we should ask what town they're in, because they might not know what district, that's all I'm saying.
One thing I think we should consider when we get near the end of this is the naming of these districts. It's never made much sense to me that we have
Shouldn't it one?
Rutland, Bennington, one, or something like that. I mean,
Some of those I think have to do with which has more, which
Yeah,
but anyway,
but by naming them by the county.
Yeah.
I think New York does an assembly district number 90. I don't see anything wrong with that.
so I mean, I guess the other question I have as a broader thing is, how, and I think we talked about having this available on the website. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, that's Eric, maybe we can get you to jump in on some of the logistics of putting this together and putting it out.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Having it on the website?
Yeah, I mean, would you want it just linked to yeah, I guess that would be the only way to do it really, is to have it posted on the website. And I think that's doable between Mia and I. We can figure it out.
Okay.
Is the survey in the final form that you'd wanted it?
No, not yet. We've just got some good comments from Jeremy, and I'd like for any other committee members who aren't with us today to be able to chime in with any changes, and then we'll get something to you probably in a week.
Yeah, that's perfect. We can recreate it. Figure out where those are gonna go to. Maybe the responses should go. I think an email that gets distributed to all of you was created. I'm not sure if that's the case or not.
We do get emails that come to everybody through the Secretary of State's office for public comment. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so I guess a question for the group would be, anytime somebody completes a survey, would you want it to come to you that same way, or would you like? Okay.
No, my experience with SurveyMonkey, maybe there's other ways to mess with it, is you'll just get it'll compile a report of all the different summaries, and it might be good if, once a week or something, for you guys just to send us an analysis or give us a back end link so we can look at the analysis.
Or we just open it for 2 weeks and say there's a finite amount of time to respond to this.
Yeah.
And then we can say, we're done, we can take it and then do the analysis. I found, me personally, trying to look at it a week in and then 2 weeks in, probably better just to wait until it's all in.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good
Yep, it's all doable.
Okay, so we need to figure out what time frame we want to keep it open.
Yeah, and how to alert people to its existence.
And which gets me to another point on service that VPERG is putting out a survey on this.
No, I got momentarily confused because it's
Yeah.
also SurveyMonkey and it has some similar questions.
Well, it looks like what they did is they took the op-ed that
Right.
we put out and they just pulled the
I finally figured that out.
questions that were on the op-ed and put it into their survey. But I mean, I don't know if anybody has heard from VPERG as to what results they received.
No, but I think it closed maybe the end of July, or at least I have a vague recollection of hearing that was how long they were going to keep it open. And I know 1 or 2 people who work at VPERG, so I could reach out to them and ask them.
Yeah, somebody should.
Yeah, I mean, just what they intend to do, that they communicated as though they were planning on sending the results to us, so hopefully that's what they're planning to do.
Mhm.
But I can reach out and try to find out what's really going on.
That'd be great.
And I mean, it's going to be slightly confusing maybe for some people who've gotten that survey or seen it, but hopefully not too bad. I mean, I'm glad they felt like that was something they wanted to reach out to people about. That part, I don't know.
No, that's great. They've got a good network, and the feedback that you get would be very valuable.
So that's less confusing. Can we use some sort of official logo or seal?
Good idea.
You can use a logo on SurveyMonkey, and the
Like a
Secretary of
banner or
State's
something?
seal or something like that. It tends to be small. I'm not very technical, but maybe they can make it look better.
Use the word official.
Sure. Yeah, just like your official rebates that you get in email all the time. I don't know. I got a couple $1 million floating around out there.
And that would be kicked off with a press release from the Secretary of State's office or from us through the Secretary of State's office. Okay. Well, why don't we see, everybody on the board should get any final comments to Jean and Rob by Monday.
Yeah.
And then send around the final version copy Eric and Chris. And if you also want to draft a press release or something like that, we've already got some of that stuff done, from the prior communications.
Yeah, I think it would be a simple press release,
Good.
looking
Thanks.
for public feedback. This is how you do it.
Thank you for taking that initiative. Really good idea. Good work.
Rob did most of it. I'm just hanging on here.
Don't say that.
Well, we
Anything,
talked through it, but he did
any-
all the actual.
any other business?
One of the things we sometimes touch on in our meetings is just other like outreach to people and entities that have occurred. And I did hear from the Addison, a reporter of the Addison Independent who I ran into for a different reason, and then somehow he managed to determine that I was on the board, and he reached out to me and said, I just got on the board, and I'd like to do, I'd like to run a story about what's going on. He was aware that we were kind of in a waiting period. And that he contacted me last week, and I said, that the board would be meeting this week and would have at least maybe a little bit more to share about some things that were coming. For example, our ideas around some public meetings, although we haven't set a schedule yet, but we, I think, have some confirmation that we're hoping to be able to get to, all parts of the state, many parts of the state, I should say. So anyway, I told him, I asked him if he could hold off until after this meeting we're having now, and he said, fine. So I hope to be talking to him. This is John Flowers is his name, at the Addison Independent. All I have.
Anything further from you? Okay. How about you, Mary?
Not somebody I've talked to, but there was an article in VT Digger a few days ago by somebody talking about redistricting in general and how it's such a contentious issue in the rest of the country, and saying that people should also be aware that our redistricting is, proposed by, what was it? I forget his exact words, but basically an unelected board, and then there are partisans in the legislature who make the final decision. And I thought it might be appropriate for probably Tom Little to write an article explaining what the process is, and in fact that our meetings are open and that we are seeking input from the public. The implication was clear that we're more or less a bunch of partisan hacks trying to, ensure our continuance in power from whatever party.
That was more the legislature. No, I read, actually, there are a couple articles. There was the one in VT Digger by Shane Spence, who I know very well. And then there was John Walters wrote on his blog, the VPO, ripping off Shane's piece, it looks like to me. But I guess there's some national group compiled states that are highly at risk for gerrymandering.
Right.
And we failed the test, I guess, because of the way this is set up, their standards are what their standards are. And I don't think they really apply to Vermont. I actually sent an email to Shane saying, this misses the mark and how the system works. They didn't listen to me. But it's basically because the legislature has control over the end product, and they look at that as a negative, and we are not, I guess, legally bound to have public input, and they say that that's a negative mark on the transparency of the system. There's just not very many opportunities for gerrymandering in the state because it conforms to town lines. You're never going to see an octopus district in Vermont ever.
We have a few anvils. Like holsters, or, you know, we have some that, but I agree.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I wouldn't take it all too seriously if Tom, if you feel like writing a response.
Full of these groups that set up their standards and then say you fail. And I'm sick of listening to them. And then they just go, yeah, you do it our way, or we're gonna say you fail, and we give you an F. Yeah, so what?
I mean, there is a national push, especially for on the, well, both state and federal district level, to have non-partisan redistricting boards. And so I'm assuming that's where it's coming from, you know,
Yeah.
that movement. And as you know, I think on the other hand, the issue is what are the results that we've gotten. It's true that whenever you have a legislature that's controlling the process, you have that risk of it being an extreme partisan exercise. So the question would really be, what are the results, or what have the results been in that? And I don't, you know, I'm not sure that they're claiming that the problems are from the actual results or just the sort of structure.
No, yeah, it's from the structure.
Do you happen to know how many states are graded very high, or are there 40 states that fail?
That's a good question. I didn't look at that.
Check that out, because there aren't very many states that do it in that way. In a pure eye. California has got a setup now where there's six.
Like Arizona, right?
Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Washington, and Michigan are at the top.
What's that website, Jeremy?
Oh, this is just a graphic from the BPO that Rob mentioned. So it's,
I haven't seen the John Wall.
We've seen some nasty results as the way we fight over, where we took senatorial district Orange. Town of Orange.
The town of Orange isn't even in.
Oh, it
Town of
can
Orange is
happen.
not in the Orange
Right.
district. And that was purely a political maneuver to help one candidate. But it happens occasionally, it doesn't happen very often.
I mean, I think well, I don't want to belabor this issue, but I mean, I think the bigger, the issues that I've come across that seem to be driving a lot of this movement is you've got whole maps where, you know, the state is maybe evenly divided in various ways. You can measure that according to the electorate, you know, between, say, Republicans and Democrats. But one of the parties has a, you know, 2/3 majority in their legislature, stuff like that. So I mean, to me, that's kind of the types of things that people are trying to figure out how to move away from. And I don't know, something actually has been on my back burner to try to figure out in Vermont, you know, how that, but I don't have a sense that type of an issue is happening in Vermont. Aside from, you know, specific issues, yes, but not like the whole state is kind of totally off. Yeah. So you understand?
When you were doing that list, there is one other split, and your comments reminded me of it, Springfield.
Well, that's on.
I have
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. That's been subject of some interesting redistricting over the years. And
City.
Rockingham.
What's a town? Technically, Springfield's a town, not a city.
And that was to get one member out of the house.
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Mhm. 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think Springfield, actually, I was writing to Tom, I think Springfield is of a size that it needs to get split, I think, somewhere in some manner, because it's too population, it's too big, it's too small for a 3-member district. And I believe it's too big for a 2-member district.
And we'll see what happens this time around.
Yeah, maybe not.
Maybe not. So a little bit of Springfield is in Chester
Baltimore, Andover,
and Chester.
yeah.
But I'm still very interested in single member districts. And, you know, like, it would result in more towns and cities being split. I think my attitude is get used to it. Other people live with it in other states, and some people live with it in this state.
The prophet has spoken. Anything else, Mary, you'd like to bring up? Is there anyone who would like to add public comment at this point before we adjourn? Benjamin, say hi to all our friends in Pomfret, will you?
I will do that.
Okay, thank you. And,
Thank you very much.
I'm going to send out some suggestions for a meeting schedule tomorrow. I already did a little bit of that and got some feedback from you about moving, possibly moving to Mondays. You'll see that for me. I can hang around here for a little while if anyone wants to just chat, but we'll stand in adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Mondays, I have a radio book show that I do with Bill Sarah from 11 to noon every Monday. If it works with everybody, I'll ask Bill if I can swap days and we can start doing Fridays, but I don't know if that's a conflict.
Okay, all right.
Tom, you knew that Mia is on the main list in terms of the software. So as soon as Ledge Council receives anything from Maptitude, she receives it as well. So she can be your main link into that.
That's the Senate, board's Senate plan.
From, right,
From 12.
yeah, excellent. Oh, thank you. This is great.
Did the board Senate plan, was it the same for Bennington as the final one? Because
No,
there were some changes down in the south in terms of Wyndham, Wilmington, for example, I think is in the Bennington district, if I'm not mistaken. I knew there were some strange things about them, so.
you wanted to see if you could.
Yeah.
Grab, to see about other stuff on the website that you like in the
Just
11
to
or
see it.
17,
It'd be nice.
or he could mail them to you.
And how do we just type the meetings? It's still all running and recording.
Oh,
Oh, you have it. You keep right there. Leave down the bottom.
Yeah.